Okay. Well, we're online now, Ashleigh, and we've got there's 6 people listening at the moment, and the numbers are climbing rapidly. So we might just wait 20 or 30 seconds until people are properly online, and then we'll kick things off. So hi to everyone that's watching at the moment, and welcome on this ECA show day for people that aren't in southeast Queensland. It's a public holiday today. Hello, Sherry Bruce. Let's put a message in our chat box. Okay, so we'll just wait a little bit more. Apologise for the barking.
If that happened, I'm at home because it is a public holiday. So if my dogs do bark, I apologise in advance. Or my little baby running around in the background. So we are people.
All right, we might kick things off. So hi everyone. So my name's Penny Prasad, and I'm a member of the Clean Growth Choices Consortium, which is delivering the Queensland Government funded Communities in Transition program. The consortium is made up of the University of Queensland, James Cook University, CSIRO and the Eco-Efficiency Group. And we are lucky enough to be working with 6 communities in Queensland looking to explore future scenarios for their regions. And the communities that we're working with is Cookshire, Charters Towers, Rockhampton, Goondiwindi, Barcaldine and Emerald. So as part of the program for Communities in Transition, we're presenting a series of webinars on topics of interest to regional Queensland communities. And this is the 3rd webinar that we've had the pleasure to deliver. And today's webinar is all about how regional communities engage in the circular economy. So we're fortunate enough to have Ashleigh Morris from Coreo and Queensland Circular Economy Lab to present today. Before I introduce Ashleigh, so our presentation will go for 30 or so minutes, and then we'll have Q&A after that. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see an icon there for Q&A, and if you click on that, you can add in questions along the way, and when we've finished the presentation, we'll take those questions. Okay. Now I'd like to introduce to you Ashleigh Morris. So Ashleigh is CEO of Coreo and a leader of Queensland Circular Economy Lab. Ashleigh was recently appointed as a Circular Economy Pioneer, which is a prestigious award granted by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is an organisation regarded as a global leader in circular economy. Ashleigh was also invited to represent Australia as a speaker at the 2019 World Circular Economy Forum in Finland. Ashleigh has had roundtable discussions with 2 Prime Ministers, the New Zealand federal government, and she was invited to accompany Australia's Federal Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment to the Future Leaders, Future Cities business mission to Japan in 2018. So without further ado, I'll pass over to you, Ashleigh, to tell us what on earth is circular economy.
Thank you for that warm introduction, Penny, and hi everybody. Thanks for joining on this public holiday. So as Penny mentioned, I am the CEO of Coreo, but I think it's always good to give context to my background and how I came to be working in the circular economy. So I did a degree in environmental health science and then did my thesis in environmental management. I was fortunate enough to travel across to Indonesia on the Prime Minister's Award, where I studied and assessed the drivers of waste pollution across Australasia. Then came back and completed my thesis on electronic waste, comparing our policies here in Australia to that of best practice in Switzerland. And then went back actually into Indonesia working in a completely different sector, which was palm oil. I worked for a not-for-profit organisation that represented 60% of the world's supply of palm oil. Now, in all the endeavours I had, they were all well-meaning and they really wanted to do good and change things for the better, but they were band-aid solutions to a very systemic problem. And that problem is actually our linear economy. which is based on a take, make, use, dispose model, where we build things, we extract resources, we build them to break, and that encourages us to keep buying. It's this consumerist economy. And for me, I had learnt about the circular economy in my research, and I really wanted to see and test its merit. And when I started looking, though, here in Australia, there wasn't any examples. There had been niche applications, but nothing on a systemic level. So that's really where I started my journey towards circular economy, and now are leading one of Australia's leading companies here focused on circular economy application. So talk about circular economy a bit more, because I'm sure some of you, it'll be the first time you may have heard that term, although it has started to gain a lot more traction in the market here and is becoming a part of everyday dialogue for a lot of people in government and in industry as well. So the circular economy is an economic performance-based model. It has 3 key principles, because I've just talked about the linear, so we'll flip to the next slide, where they focus on designing out waste and pollution, keeping products and materials at their highest use for as long as possible, and regenerating natural systems. The circular economy was also supported by 5 different business models, and I can share some further insight into those as I give examples later in today's conversation. But I think where it really helps, because these are quite high level, is when I start to give you some of the examples. And I'll start at the very beginning with my journey on founding Australia's first systemic project at a street level on the Sunshine Coast, where we aptly had a project called the Circular Experiment. So on the screen here, this is the street, Ocean Street, where we did our pilot project. It had 56 businesses in total. We successfully engaged 45 of those businesses, which are small to medium enterprise. I'm talking about a chiropractor, second-hand book trading stores. There was 3 different hairdressers. You can see there was 6 retail, 31 service providers, and 19 hospitality restaurants. Some of these were mum and dad restaurants. Others were more corporate, where you had, one of the owners having 5 different stores on the street. So there was a mixture of different sized businesses. But again, this precinct or this street is very typical of what we would see around any sort of little shopping precinct in Australia. So our task and why we selected this street was to apply 6 different circular economy principles over 6 months. This was a really applied research project, and as it was titled, The Circular Experiment, it very much was an experiment at that time to really understand, did the circular economy save businesses money? Did it make them money? Did it improve their environmental performance? And did it build social capital? And this is what we were really trying to find out over that 6-month time frame. So to talk about some of the projects that we did, we had the 6 principles, but it materialized into over 20 projects here. And I want to dive into a couple of these to give you examples about how circular economy can be applied. So the first one I want to talk about is cigarette butts. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, how do cigarette butts have any part in a circular economy? But the fact is, cigarette butts were the one thing that unified this entire street of businesses. Prior to myself and my co-founder Janie working on this street, the businesses didn't really talk to each other. They knew each other by name, waved hi in the morning, but when we went around individually and asked them what their problem was, they were like, the street is grungy, it has a bad name, it's seen as dirty, and people didn't want to come down there and spend a long lunch and spend more money. So for us, as we started talking to each of these businesses, we're saying, oh, did you know they said the exact same thing about the cigarette litter? How about we design a project where we collectively try to address cigarette litter on the street? And then we've seen that the businesses all did start to come together around this particular problem. And that's where the opportunity sits, when you start to bring people together to work systemically towards addressing a challenge. And this challenge, as shown here on the screen, was quite abundant. Jenny and I did a cigarette, we first of all wanted to clean the street up. So we did a pickup over 1 hour on a Saturday morning. We collected over 4,000 bucks as piled there in the bag. So it was pretty dirty down there. But what we had also noticed is a lot of the infrastructure wasn't supporting proper disposal of this litter. The bins were actually designed to not be visible. We don't really like to see bins, and they're designed like a typical street post, the same color as a car parking post. So for us, we partnered with the council, and we also had the support of the businesses to redesign the bins, and we chose a ballot bin as a style to do this. Now, This bin has the two columns that is clear, as you can see in the picture, and it asks a funny question. It's a gamification model. So, well, which is it then, board shorts or budget smugglers? This had just been in, but typically we would see those panels of cigarette butts fill up quite quickly through the day, and we were in charge of emptying and making sure the system was working. And it achieved about a 70% reduction in litter in the streets, so that was huge for us. But that wasn't the only thing we did, as you can see on the slides here as well. We also put thought-provoking statements on the street. Don't be trashy, bin your butt. But there was another one that said, what would you do if your mum was watching? And that proved to be pretty effective with smokers, thinking twice before flicking their butt in the garden. But for us, as part of this project, it was really to try to understand, how a litter could affect the economy of a street and ultimately the revenue of a business. We were able to definitely prove that there was a correspondence between those two things, the street branding being affected by litter, then that ultimately affecting the economy. So if we could put new infrastructure in place, some really simple street stickers. We also did an education campaign with the businesses and with residents as well from this community. It turned out that we could reduce it again by 70%. So we had huge outcomes, successful outcomes around cigarette litter. And it's all through applying a different way of thinking, which is, the way around circular economy. Now to talk about the next project, as you can see, we did a waste audit, and this is the food waste that we got out of just one 660 litre bin, and there were 17 of these bins just in one part of the street. So it was an enormous amount of waste infrastructure to support a lot of the hospitality retailers. And food waste, food and organic material typically constitutes about 40 to 50% of a bin. It's a heavy weighted material. At the time, the landfill levy wasn't in place, but you could imagine with a weighty material like that, it would cost these businesses a significant amount of money. The businesses, though, I will say, were being charged. We did all the mapping alongside the waste provider for the street and the council. The entire street was being charged over $220,000 a year. And it was, they were trying to improve the branding and destination of this street so they could attract more customers down there, essentially. But because it was a one-way, end-to-end street of 220 metres roughly, they'd have the waste trucks come down and it would really destroy the amenity for a short period of time, but it just wasn't nice every single day having this happen because the street wasn't designed to manage its waste at the time of development, which was well over 30 to 40 years ago. So we decided that we wanted to keep food waste out of these bins and divert it to a commercial composter who was only located about 17 minutes away from the street. So we partnered with all of the retail businesses on the street to start a diversion project. So these were the two ladies that we partnered with from Earthborn, based out in Palmwoods. And so we partnered with Biopack as well on this project to, one, get in-kitchen bins and do a very quick education session, to buy a bulk bin to then capture all that material, then for it to be diverted. And we had a less than 1% contamination rate. The businesses had huge success. They advertised this on their menus. The community really got behind it. I will say, for all of the projects, and again, there was over 20 of these, the media was a huge factor for us. This street was incredibly celebrated by the broader Sunshine Coast community for the action they were taking. And that does translate back into money into these businesses. If they were doing things differently and better than other businesses, they had a competitive advantage. And Ocean Street, we were very clever in terms of our branding and destination, and we did work closely with the businesses on this. Because it was aptly titled Ocean Street, we leveraged everything to say we were helping to benefit the reef. We partnered with an organisation called Citizens of the Great Barrier Reef, and that really promotes citizens taking small steps each day, like eliminating straws, not using single-use cups, bottles, etc. So this street was, the first systems level approach to achieving that organisation's project. So it was an incredible opportunity for these businesses to be a part of the experiment. Now to talk about something more recently and where we took our business, our concept to scale. And, we're incredibly proud about this. We just wrapped up the Circular Economy Lab, which is Australia's first Circular Economy Lab, only in July. So knowing that our organisation wanted to take what we were doing to scale, we had a conversation with the Director General from the Department of Environment and Science late last year, Jamie Merrick, who also supported, the concept and understanding of circular economy. But like everybody, it is a high-level concept. What does it really mean? how does it become tangible? And it becomes tangible through demonstration and seeing a demonstration across multiple sectors with different industry players. So for us, the Circular Economy Lab was the mechanism to achieve that, to achieve more demonstration. So the lab itself is a 2.5-month rapid prototyping process where we bring in multiple stakeholders. And in this case, we had 27 different entities, from local government to social enterprise to Australia's largest multinational corporations, coming together around 5 challenge or opportunity areas that we would then apply circular economy principles or business models to. Now, I'm going to walk through 3 of the examples today to give you, again, a better understanding of how circular economy can be applied in different sectors and with different types of businesses. Now, the first example was led by the foundation partner, the Meat and Livestock Association of Australia. So the Meat and Livestock Association of Australia said, look, we're pretty open to, addressing anything, any challenge. They said, let's just bring together some key actors and let's start to design around some solutions. But they have their businesses based in the regions and really passionate about being able to capture and share best practice. So they were joined by Freeze Dry Industries, Cisco and Grove Juice. And as we went through the 2.5-month rapid prototyping process, it became clear that for any regional agricultural based business, the challenge is around water. There were some statements in the lab from Grove Juice saying, look, you think I'm in the business of orange juice, but I'm actually in the business of water. I need to start working more collaboratively with those in my region and start to understand what knowledge sits there, what best practice sits there, but also what assets. And when we talk about assets, we're talking about waste. There's often quite an abundance of wasted materials in their regional communities, on farms, etc. But it just can't get it. We can't find a good use for it often because we need to get logistics, and Australia is a big place and logistics can cripple the movement of material. So this team actually came up with a concept called Ripple, which really supports the best practice coming off some of our agricultural productions and farms from Grove Juice and MLA's connections and their direct network, to then be supported by Cisco to create this platform called Ripple. So on this platform, there'll be the exchange of best practice and knowledge, and also a database of what materials are out there that can be valorized by communities. Once we have this visibility and understanding of what is available, we can start to innovate around new concepts and how we can maximize the value of the materials and assets that we have. So that project is now being actioned by MLA and Cisco and being taken forward. So it's an incredible outcome. So do keep an eye out, because I believe it will be going live by the end of the year. Now to move through to the foundation partner, COEX. So the focus was here. I'm not sure if you're familiar with COEX. So COEX is the appointed body to manage our container deposit scheme here in Queensland. So they manage the 10 cents, the cans and all the materials. By all accounts, that scheme has been incredibly successful in collecting materials. So those cans, we're collecting over 3 million a day. But they were actually being stockpiled, to a lot of people's surprise. They're beautiful, clean material streams. They have a very high value in market, but we didn't have end market processing capacity here as it stood. So what COEX came to us and said, we were actually talking to Coca-Cola Amatil, which are one of the directors as a part of COEX. They said, look, we need to find markets in Australia that can process material. We want to keep the value in this economy. A lot of these big brands like Coca-Cola, they have targets that they want to meet, but that was near impossible without forming these relationships with the providers that you see on this page. So we brought together Rio Tinto, Evolve Group and Everledger, and Astron Sustainability. Sorry, their logo's not on here, I've just realised, but they came in as well. So we were really focused in on the plastic supply chain and the aluminium can supply chain. So I'll break those 2 segments down so you can understand what the projects are now. So we have a number of, about 1.5 billion aluminium cans are collected annually through the scheme, or will be collected annually through the container deposit scheme. And Rio Tinto has a smelter based in Gladstone that processes bauxite into alumina. So previously to this, all of our aluminium cans, or the vast majority, were being sent offshore to Taiwan to be brought back in as ingot, which is a heavy aluminium block that then gets rolled into aluminium plate to essentially then make a can. Now, we wanted to change this completely, and knowing that Rio Tinto had this smelter based in Gladstone that actually could put back in recycled aluminium to create alumina again, we wanted to convene that relationship. So Rio Tinto will now use the idle capacity in their smelter, which consumes about over 5% of our state's energy. So this is an incredibly exciting project, not just, you know, for the benefit of these two parties, but actually for the broader public here in Queensland. That smelter, again, using 5% of our state's energy. That energy comes from coal right now. So when you put recycled alumina back through the smelter, it reduces energy consumption by 95%. So this is a massive emission saving. It makes a massive saving commercially for Rio Tinto in terms of their energy cost. And we're able to keep the value in this direct economy and provide jobs in Gladstone in regional Queensland. So that's a fantastic outcome from that partnership. Now with the plastics, Evolve Group, which is an advanced manufacturer based in Logan, that provides to the likes of Bunnings, etc., very competitively, and also Astron Sustainability, who aren't featured on the slide deck here. They've partnered with COEX to take the PET material stream to start to make new higher value products. What happens often, and this is where circular economy differs from any other model, is that we start to downgrade products or take them directly across into an equivalent product. But that ultimately ends up just being an extension of recycling, which is the lowest grade of a circular economy model. We want to start to look at reprocessing, reusing, remanufacturing, etc., with recycling being the last loop in the model. So what Evolve Group and Astron Sustainability really endeavoured to do is to upgrade, use the PET material input to create high value products to put back into market. And they have the connection. So Astron Sustainability is actually a subsidiary of Pact Group that manufacture plastics. So they really want to decouple their input of virgin material to then create high value plastic products made out of recycled polymer. Equally, Evolve Group will start to manufacture waste block products, which are products that are going to be used for a very, very long period of time that have a high value in market that they sell to the likes of Bunnings again. Now, Everledger, which is our chief entrepreneur for the state's company, is a blockchain company that's really going to start to track and trace these materials and where they go. Because I don't know about you, but in the broader public, there has been a bit of unrest in terms of trusting where our recycling content goes. So Everledger's partnership in this project is really to start giving visibility and transparency around the material from where it's collected to where it's being processed and then where it's going. So this team is also starting to look at the different applications of a sort of a branding or a logo that can give you a confidence that this product's been in journey, 10 to 15 or 20 times, etc. So again, a really impactful project that when you apply circular economy, you get a multitude of outcomes, both economic, social, and environmental. Now, the last project that I want to share with you was led by the foundation partner, Lend-Lease. So this is where we see the application of a circular economy business model, which is a product to service shift. So to understand what a product to service shift looks like, I can talk about an example of that being lighting. So we don't really want to pay for the light fixture. We just want to be able to turn on our switch and have light. So a company that led this very famously was Philips. Obviously their business was based on putting light fixtures into market. Now their business is based on providing lighting as a service, where they retain the ownership of the lighting fixture and they also pay the energy bill. This has incentivized them to manufacture lighting fixtures that last in longevity and also make the most modular, energy efficient fixture as well, and to form long-term relationships with their providers rather than a single transaction. So this is where you can start to see where circular economy can make a lot of business sense. Now for Lend-Lease, they have a master plan community called Yarrabilba, which is based between Brisbane and the Gold Coast. It's actually situated in Logan. It's going to be home to 45,000 people over the next 30 years. And they realise that they don't have much influence over energy consumption at a household level. But they have ambitious targets that they want to achieve to make sure this community becomes Australia's first circular economy community, which means decoupling the consumption of finite resources, and that is energy. So knowing that they don't have much influence, we partnered them with Fisher & Paykel, Substation 33, RACQ, Logan Access, and also Logan City Council to look at a product to service model for the application of kitchen appliances. There'd been some study done by CSIRO in this community with 60 households, and what we understood from that study was that 50% of the energy consumption was based from plug load, so that's appliances plugged into walls. In knowing that, this partnership enabled a project to come out that was called Kitchen as a Subscription. So for first home buyers, they can now have access, as of about 2 months' time, they'll have access to Fisher & Paykel, who's the manufacturer of appliances. Their appliances there's so many appliance words they use. Okay, they'll have access to 5 appliances for $2 a day, as $2 a week as a subscription. That subscription model will also include on-demand servicing from Logan Access, which is a social enterprise. And when these appliances reach their end of life, Substation 33, who currently manages e-waste, will take these components and utilize them in a way that maintains their value. And RACQ, being a home insurance provider, will have now greater confidence in market that there's not going to be leaks, there's not going to be faults and fires, etc. So these households will also get a lesser premium on their insurance. So again, this is an incredible model of a different way to think about how you can apply circular economy to achieve multiple outcomes. So those 3 projects that I mentioned, they will all be implemented by the end of the year. The mandate for the Circular Economy Lab was that these need to be commercially viable. They need to also improve economic and social outcomes, and that's what circular economy always intends to do. It is an economic performance-based model that has very positive collateral benefit to the environment and to social capital. So I think we've reached the end of the chat, and I think this is where it's really good to start to field some questions, because this is where we can start to unpack certain things that may have just flown over the top of your head or that you want to dive in and learn a little bit more about. So as Penny mentioned earlier, there is a Q&A function. I think we've got 2 questions there, and I believe Penny's going to read the questions out. So please throw them out there if you have some questions, or you know, once we answer some of these, if you have a follow-up question, please jot it down there so I can answer to it.
Sorry, just using my microphone there. So we just have a question from Keith Noble, and he's just asking, I'd welcome your thoughts on opportunities for circular economy to build natural capital versus regulations. I'm thinking here of the Great Barrier Reef water quality contributions by farmers, which have been growing over the past decade, but momentum is under threat by the new reef regulations. And then he's mentioning the concept of reef credits. So
that's a very good question. So, and this is the reef is a very hot topic, and there's just to preface it and give broader content, then I'll dive right into what you've asked me. When we're thinking about the reef, that we have direct impacts, and the one you've mentioned definitely is the water quality that's feeding into the reef, but we got to think about the system, the entire system that feeds into the reef, the indirect effects of the everyday actions that we're taking in the regions, you know, here in Brisbane, etc. And I think, you know, there's been a lot of talk about farmers and the sediment, etc., and pollutants that are entering the waterways. There is, with the intent, you know, the principles of circular economy, the ability to build natural capital, as you mentioned, to think about things differently. What can we actually be putting into these waterways that will build natural capital plus reduce the pollutants? Things like green infrastructure, so using plants that naturally do this, that suck out the chemicals, you know, hold in the carbon, etc., capture any sediment and be the filtration system. You know, that's a smart investment versus a regulation. And that's something definitely, you know, with our organisation working closely with government, that's the sort of things that we are talking about. How can we get a win-win situation here to ultimately improve the outcome for the reef, but also not have that impact business? So I hope that answered some of your question around how we can build natural capital through circular economy.
Thanks, Ash. We've got another question here from Don Parry, and he's asking, how do we get serious about single-use water bottles and pay more than petrol for potable water?
Yes. Hi, Don. That's a good question. You know, the first part I will address with single use. It's only single use because we use it in that way. You know, a PET plastic bottle isn't actually single use. We could use it multiple times. It's just a human behavior that prevents it. And I think we need to change our thinking a little bit on that. But I agree, water is such a valuable resource. We're the second driest continent on Earth. Water in itself being bottled doesn't make much sense for an economy that has drinkable potable water. And our price point is a big problem. Now, Penny did mention that I spoke at the World Circular Economy Forum earlier in the year. There was a big conversation at a global level on harmful subsidies. We do have subsidies in place that make things like crude oil cheaper than buying water, but water is not adequately priced either. We have this market failure in many different respects, that we don't place a high enough value on things that actually we need to be putting the highest value on, such as water. So I agree, that's not an easy thing to tackle right now, but it needs to happen. And what I was inspired by and place hope in is that those conversations are taking place. How do we remove harmful subsidies and create better incentives to shift things, and, you know, like the price of our precious resources? So it's promising, it needs to happen, and I'm hopefully can contribute to that, and I hope we all can.
Okay. Another question, do we need to change food packaging regulations?
Sorry, Penny, I just dropped out a little bit. Couldn't hear you.
So the question is, do we need to change food packaging regulations?
Couldn't hear you again. Sorry, guys. I'm going to plug in my headphones just in case it's my side. What could be my speakers? One moment. Fire away again, Penny. Okay.
So you can hear now.
Yeah.
So the question is, do we need to change food packaging regulations?
That's a very broad question. There's a lot of work being done in the packaging space, and there's a lot of focus from brands both here in Australia and globally talking about how do we change packaging. I think all in all, we need to think about the entire value chain. So yes, we need to design things differently with more modularity to be able to pull them apart. They almost need a birth certificate to say this is the type of material that's in them, so we can understand the value of those materials. But also in that birth certificate to tell us how we pull it apart. And this is a part of, you know, the designer starting or product stewardship, where, you know, the manufacturer takes responsibility for it at its end of life. Because right now we have two polar ends of a value chain, sorry, my hand's going off screen, where they don't talk to each other. The designer that selects the polymer to create a package actually doesn't ever talk to the recycler down the end who goes, oh, I need to process that. And when we have packaging, it does a very important job, and this is something that we don't often give enough thought to, that the materials like plastic polymers out there, they do a fantastic job, pretty much better than most other materials, which is why it's so abundant, because it's, you know, heat resistant, it's flexible, it can be hard, so many things, and it preserves the product inside, and often that is a perishable item, and the loss of that perishable component is a bigger loss than the plastic in itself. But so I think, yes, we do need to start to redesign our packaging, but we also need to start thinking holistically in the entire value chain. How do we get these actors to talk together to make sure that we have a good understanding of the materials and polymers being used, so that they can be valorized at their end of life, and there shouldn't really be an end of life. These things should come back into the system, really a closed loop material flow.
Thanks, Ashleigh. This is from Stuart Christie. So at the start of the talk, he highlighted that there are 5 business models that underline the circular economy. Can you outline what they are? Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So I started talking about some of them. So there's the product to service shift, there's the sharing economy, there's the resource recovery models, there's the circular supply models. I think where have I missed one? Circular supply models, product life extension. And that was similar to what I was talking about with the packaging. So they're the 5 key models. I would encourage you to have a look at those models. I think at the end of this slide deck, there's a couple of links where you'll definitely be able to read further about the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, circular economy, the key principles, and those business models. We've talked about a couple of them on the call today, but there's many different ways, and again, how they can be applied to different sectors. And I think looking at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, again, they have a number of case studies which will be of a real benefit to, I'm sure, all of you on this call, to look at the different applications, the different outcomes that can result in, and yeah, that's, I'll probably answer that. I want to waffle on.
So Ashleigh, I was interested in the future of agri-food, that project that you have with the Circular Economy Lab, MLA, and there was another company that was it Freeze
Dry Industries, yes.
Can you just talk a little bit more about that project and you know, with Freeze Dry Industries, what their involvement is with the project as well?
So right now the teams are coming. The lab had a $100,000 seed fund, so the teams are coming up with their one pager that will form the different partnership contributions and also outcomes. So for freeze-dry, I'm not sure exactly on what their direct input for this particular regional project will be, because I think the team's intention here is to have it done in Warwick, which is where Grove Juice has got a lot of their business based, and they also have a lot of pressure on water right now. I believe they've been in drought. So that's where they're going to start the project as its catalyst and foundation. So, but for freeze-dry, what we really learned from them in the Circular Economy Lab is that they are very different to the other businesses there. The ones that place emphasis on water, they actually pay to get water taken away, because as their name alludes to, that they freeze-dry some of the waste products that come out of industry. So they have a number of products in market, like dried pineapple chips, etc. But they, through their extraction process, they end up with a lot of trade waste water. And so for them, they're like, that's an asset for us that we're actually getting charged trade waste for, to have it removed off site. How can we start to think about partnering with industry like MLA, like Grove Juice, that actually need a water input into their business? If we can clean that water to a standard where it can be put into another business, that's what that focus is there. But I think in this context, because it's quite regional, that co-location is not yet viable, or won't yet happen in the first phase, but the intention is that they will no longer be paying for trade waste. They'll start to use that as a new revenue stream. So I hope that answers it, Penny.
Okay, thank you. So Ashleigh, just back to our program, which is the Communities in Transition program, and I mentioned at the start of the webinar that we're working with 6 Queensland communities at the moment. So I'll just name those again. So that was Cooktown, Charters Towers, Rockhampton, Buckholden, Emerald and Goondiwindi. Mm-hmm. And for people that are out in those communities, I think we've got a couple of slides there. Mm-hmm. We have them there. We just wanted to sort of talk about, you know, as an individual or even someone that's running a business out in a regional community, you know, what can they do even tomorrow to try to engage in the circular economy?
Yeah. So there's a lot of quick things that you can do, and you probably may already be doing, to contribute into the creation of a circular economy. And then we can talk about some of the more ambitious things as well. So I mentioned the container deposit scheme. That's a fantastic way to get clean material streams that then can be put back into market. It's a very simple thing to do, but it feeds into a much bigger system around material values and material economies here in Queensland. So I would encourage you to take part in that. So check if your local supermarket will take back recycled products, take back batteries and other e-waste forms. There's a lot of companies that are now actually saying, we'll take our materials back and put it back in our direct supply chain. So I encourage you to really look at that, because again, it's stimulating these better practices by companies and businesses. So that's a quick and easy one. Soft plastics to Coles and Woolies, that's been in for a while now, but you know, again, a very simple thing you can do today, tomorrow, etc. So support your local opportunity shop or op shop. That's a great thing to do as well. And you know, vintage for anything is vintage actually says it has a higher value, etc. So I'd encourage you to do that. Start a street or community compost hub. Composting is a fantastic way to keep food waste out of your bin and also enable it to have benefit into your broader community. And creating these community gardens is a fantastic thing to do as well. And having good soil to grow the produce to then, you know, have people sharing a meal it's a great catalyst for a more systemic level value generation to a community. So I really, really love that one. You can offset your own carbon emissions. I think Penny's put a link there at the Green Fleet if you really want to start to understand your carbon emissions. There's a lot of calculators online that you can look at, but that's a good link too if you want to start to offset, etc. Really standard one, try to use your bike, walk, etc. as much as possible versus getting in the car, you know, and get some fresh air. It's good for us. We're all getting a bit chubby here in Australia. Look at the potential for a sharing economy model. So can you share your car, or can you hire a car? There's a lot of new companies coming into the market that are fantastic. I think in Brisbane CBD now we have Lime scooters. I double with my sister all the time around the city. It's a lot of fun, and it's a great way to get around versus getting stuck in traffic. So start to think about the different modes of transport that you can take. Now we're getting a little bit more ambitious. This is check for the possibility of community energy sharing schemes. I know there's some challenges here in Queensland with peer-to-peer sharing, but it's happening all around other parts of Australia. And this is sort of things that we can start to take forward and push for in our communities, and it makes a lot of sense. We did look at a peer-to-peer sharing of renewable energy generation in Ocean Street. It didn't go ahead at this stage, but there's a lot of the foundational works are being done in terms of getting renewable energy on these buildings and then starting to share that. So that's a really good one, I think, for if you have a business located in the street with lots of other businesses or other actors, but even in a residential area, you can actually start to think about, for those inputs, these utilities, how can we maximize the use of them and start to have better relationships with our neighbouring businesses or our neighbours. So invest in a small amount of renewable energy. So that's a complement to the other one. I think renewables is a fantastic way to move forward. I think Australia has the highest capita of solar panels on our residential homes, which is fantastic. So we certainly have adopted that at at an individual level. So I would encourage you, if you haven't, to look at it. It will definitely reduce your energy bills, because what we know around energy is that it's increasing about 70% per year, which is brutal, and it's crippling a lot of small business. So think about the different energy inputs you can get being from renewable. So that's the individual concepts, the things you can do, 10 quick ones, but then moving into 10 ideas for regional businesses. So this is I can't stress this one enough. Knowing your energy, water and waste costs. Get your baselines. You'll probably be very surprised. For the businesses on Ocean Street, they had a larger landlord, a lot of them, and it was kind of hidden. There was no line that said waste charge. It was like an overall cleaning and services charge. And that can be really difficult for a small business to understand where their money is going. So I would encourage you, though, to really start to understand your costs. Once you understand that and have visibility, you can start to take action. So that's a really, really key step. Industrial estates, potential for sharing resources, energy, water and waste. That's something we just touched on from an individual perspective. But again, I think that's a fantastic opportunity to start to do things collaboratively, which is a real, it's the cornerstone of circular economy. We can't be moving forward as individuals anymore. It's about moving forward collectively, because that's where the real value is and that's where the real savings are as well. So think about how you can actually partner with your neighbouring businesses, your neighbours again, to look at, the utilities and managing them differently in terms of, for Ocean Street, again, it was a $220,000 charge. There was a vacant car park. We did talk to the local government quite extensively about putting in large compactors that the businesses would do a leasing arrangement on, and they would collectively pay for that. That would have reduced their expenditure by about 70%, and it would have, been a much more improved amenity for this street as well. So think about the different ways you can do things, and when you have collaboration, it really carries a lot of weight with your local government and your service providers. So consider what packaging is being used. Can it be recycled, reused or recycled? Can your customers return it? If you are a brand or if you are a manufacturer, I couldn't stress for you enough to start to look at what your packaging is made out of, where does it go? Because the worst thing that any brand or manufacturer could have happen is that, and it happens to McDonald's all the time, that it becomes the thing that the turtle's choking on, or that's, in the river, or it's in the kids' park. That's a part of your brand. It is critical you understand what your products are made out of and where they end up, and start to try to address it and do better. And for brands, there was a statistic shared by Unilever's CEO at the World Circular Economy Forum, brands that are transitioning towards a circular economy are increasing a market share of about 60%. There is a whole market out there that wants brands and manufacturers to be doing a lot better and having transparency, telling people that you're doing better. They want to know, not greenwashing, just doing better and being very honest about it, and you will reap the benefits significantly. So for retail, food takeaway, food packaging, can customers bring their own? I would encourage you to start forming, if you're a retailer that have these types of products, that your customers can bring their coffee cup in, they can bring a bowl in. You form a much better relationship with your direct clientele, and that's what really gets a business to be successful relationships. So I would encourage you to start to look at what options you can give your customers as they come in, and get them to use their own products as well. Review the design of products designed for recyclability. Absolutely, I would design for it to be reused, repurposed, remanufactured, and recyclability definitely. So do think about that. Shared car charging stations for local and regional travel. Again, I think it's good to start to look at the different models around sharing assets, sharing infrastructure for charging. Sharing economies are fantastic, and everybody kind of wins in that model. Organic waste collection. So if you are, again, a retailer or a business that has a lot of food and organic material that's ending up in your waste, there are companies like Mallow Sustainability based here in Brisbane that can take that resource off your hands, avoid you getting the landfill levy, and take it to good use. And that's something you can tell your customers and talk proudly about. So I encourage you to look at the alternatives around diverting food and organic waste out of your bin. Can you access and safely use council treated wastewater? This one's brilliant. So we work with the Brisbane Airport Corporation. They're using all recycled water for their new runway development. That is a multiple billion-dollar project. So you can imagine the amount of water that's being used there to make sure there's not sand and things flying, you know, as planes are coming in on the current runway. I would encourage you, like any other business, to start to think about how you can use water more efficiently. Can you use and maximize your trade waste? Can you actually use recycled water in your processes? Can you maximize the water once you have it? That's a huge question to ask of yourself. So that one's a really big one. Definitely look at that. Invest in renewable energy. We've talked a bit about that, so I won't go into it again. It's just common sense these days. Logistics, potential for backloading of transport deliveries. That's a huge one. Logistics, again, we have a big country, and for all of the communities and transition communities, you are a regional area. You have a lot of inputs coming in and you have a lot of things going out. Backloading just makes a lot of sense as well. But you needed to start having conversations with those other businesses in your region. What are all the inputs coming in? And what are the outputs going out? And are those trucks empty? And how you start to make those connections. So I would really encourage you to look at that, our reverse logistics principle. We did that for Ocean Street very successfully. So, as mentioned, there are some links that Penny shared here that I would encourage you to look at. Again, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is the global thought leader. They have a huge amount of case studies. They've also just launched their learning hub that takes you through Circular Economy 101 and shares a lot of detail about different circular economy exercises that you can take into your business and start to apply. So definitely look at that. There's some other links here from the Green Business Network, and also the link to the Circular Economy Lab where you can read about those projects, watch our launch videos, etc., and start to understand who else were the businesses that came into the lab, because it's not just about big multinational corporations. Again, we had social enterprise, not-for-profits, local government. That's what circular economy is built on, the collaboration between different actors to maximize outcomes. So I would encourage you to look at all of those links. And I think we're done there.
Awesome. Okay. We'll just switch to just some slides just to finish off. So just give me a moment as I figure out the technology. Here we go. Okay, well, a big thank you to you, Ashleigh, just for your time today, especially again, as I mentioned at the start, it's actually a public holiday here in Brisbane, and I've made Ashleigh work on her holiday, so I apologise for that. That was my error. But yeah, thank you for your presentation. It's been excellent, really interesting to hear about the work that you did at Ocean Street, and really, really interesting to hear about the Circular Ecolab projects. That's a really, a fantastic bunch of projects, and there's going to be big changes, isn't there, in our economy when all these things come into fruition.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you everybody for listening in. I hope I've been able to impart some lessons that are, can be applied in your business or in your community. But please follow along my journey and our company's journey. There'll be a lot of things that come to fruition, like Penny is saying, that you could probably get involved in and learn from again. So I appreciate all of your time, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Okay, so just before we shoot off, so just to remind listeners that we've got some upcoming webinars. We have one next week on carbon farming. So if that's your area of interest, please register and have a listen. And then we have 4 more webinars after that you can see on the screen there. You can register just through going to that cleangrowthchoices.org webinars link. So again, thanks, Ashleigh. It's been a pleasure, and I hope that the listeners got some ideas out of today. We really want to try to inspire people to not just sort of sit back and listen, but what can you take out of today and do something differently tomorrow. So just with that in mind. Okay, so that's all from us. Didn't share the screen very well, I think, but thanks for listening, and have a great day. Goodbye.
Bye.